Well, good morning. This is Monday, Martin Luther King Day, and we just received our first snowfall where I live outside Nashville, Tennessee. About 6, 7 inches. That'll probably wipe us out of school for a week, be my guess. So today we are on episode 5, and we are beginning with the question, did the Secret Service just have a bad day? And you know, in episode 4, we talked about how the Secret Service came to be, and it was the result of a rash of assassinations, 3 within a 40-year time period in American politics, which compared to the 100 years previous was a epidemic. And if you remember, Abraham Lincoln signed the Secret Service into existence on the same day that he was assassinated. Its original purpose was not to provide security detail for the president. It was to provide security for the nation's currency against counterfeiters. But after McKinley was assassinated in 1901, the third assassination in a very short time period, the Congress decided to add protection of the president to the Secret Service's job description. And from 1901 to 1963, for the next 62 years, we didn't have any assassinations. The Secret Service basically had a perfect record. It was unblemished. And then we get to Dallas. And the manner in which the assassination happened, and then some of the issues that we will see that are just readily apparent. We're not going to dive too deep into it because I'm going to save a lot of this for when I get to the 5 conspirators. But just some of the stuff that is readily apparent made people wonder, well, what was going on with the Secret Service that day? Have they just been lucky for 62 years, or they just have a bad day? What's going on? So that's what we want to look at a little bit today. Obviously, it was a disaster, and the failures, and I'm just, like I said, I'm just going to name a few of them. There's so many of them. I think I'm going to save the bulk of them for when we get into the 5 conspirators, because I think to answer the question here, where does coincidence end, conspiracy begin? You have to start to when there are just failures upon failures upon failures upon failures, many of them intentional. You have to begin wondering what role the Secret Service actually played in this assassination. So it was a disaster, and it began with the fact that the Secret Service had advanced knowledge that there was an assassination plot afoot. November 2, 1963, 20 days prior, the FBI had received an anonymous tip. I say anonymous, the caller identified himself as Lee. We now know that that was Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald was an FBI informant, going back to his readmittance to the United States from Russia. It was the deal he made with Bobby Kennedy to be an informant on the CIA. And he had identified a plot in Chicago to assassinate JFK. And in his telex, in the telex from the FBI, which was passed up the chain to the Secret Service in Washington, the plot was to involve suspects with high-powered rifles, telescopic sights. It would be an assassination along the motorcade route. It was almost a perfect dry run of what eventually happened 20 days later in Dallas. There was a motorcade. It was going to be routed through the downtown of Chicago, past several high-rise buildings, in which one of those buildings would be a patsy. In this case, the patsy's name was Thomas Arthur Valley, who the FBI had advanced knowledge of this, and yet did not arrest him until after the trip was canceled. The White House eventually canceled the trip when they heard about this plot. And after it was canceled, they arrested him. And when they arrested this guy, Thomas Arthur Valley, who was basically Chicago's version of Lee Harvey Oswald, if the assassination had happened in Chicago instead of Dallas, we'd never heard of Lee Harvey Oswald, but the history books would be full of Thomas Arthur Valley. Anyway, when they arrested him, he had a truck full of ammo. He was heading towards work, which he worked. So stop me if this sounds familiar, in an office that overlooked the route of the motorcade. Also arrested based on the tip from a cleaning lady was two Cubans of a four-man Cuban group of four men that were Cubans who were staying in a flop house. And while she was cleaning their room, mistakenly went into a part of the area where evidently she wasn't supposed to go, or they didn't think she was going to go. And there was a bed full of high-powered rifles and ammunition. She also found a map with the motorcade route, an X marked along the spot where, in front of the office building where Thomas Arthur Valley worked. That was hypothetically where the shooting was supposed to take place. Anyway, the FBI laid wait for these four Cubans who were out and about doing whatever. At the time, they weren't in the room, but when they came back, they arrested two of them. The other two got away. Actually, what happened was the other two spotted the fact that they were being followed, and so they spooked and they left. They did arrest two men of the four-man Cuban hit squad. So they have in custody Thomas Arthur Valley, who is clearly up to something, and they have two men of a four-man Cuban hit team who are clearly up to something, with a room full of high-powered rifles and scopes and things of that nature. All of these three men were released in the hours afterwards, after the trip was canceled. Thomas Arthur Valley, we find out later, it took decades to find him. He sort of just disappeared, ended up in witness protection, which is interesting in its own right. We'll talk more about that later. And the two men who were released, the FBI would never release their names. However, we found out from a whistleblower inside the Secret Service, there was a Chicago Secret Service agent who was privy to the interrogations of these two Cubans, and he knew their names. And he later, in his own testimony about the Secret Service's role in the assassination in Dallas, told this story about what had happened 20 days prior in Chicago. His name was Abraham Bolden. And we will talk more about Abraham Bolden, but suffice it to say that he identified these two men. And remember, the FBI had withheld their names. We find out why. They were both CIA operatives. One was a well-known assassin for the CIA, and the other was his spotter. Now, interestingly, after they were arrested in Chicago, they sort of disappeared. But guess where they reappeared? 20 days later, they were in Dallas, the same two guys. In fact, one of them, James Braden, was actually arrested or detained by Dallas police because he was in a building, the Daltex building, which overlooked Dealey Plaza, and he wasn't supposed to be there. And after the shooting, the Dallas police are running around looking at all these buildings, and here comes James Braden down the stairs. He said he was there making a phone call. He was there for business purposes. But isn't it awful interesting that two of the four-man Cuban hit team were detained in Chicago, were also in Dallas 20 days later? And if you really want to be conspiratorial about it, 5 years later, that same James Braden was also in Los Angeles at the site of the Bobby Kennedy assassination. Anyway, the Secret Service had all of this information in advance because the FBI had given them this tip from Lee. However, when the White House canceled the trip, they released all these men in custody, put them back into circulation, and as we had just learned, two of them reappeared back down in Dallas. My point in saying all this is that the Secret Service had advance notice that there was a plot to kill Kennedy, and if they just did the comparison between the two trips, the one to Chicago and one to Dallas, they realized they're identical. There was going to be a flight into both cities. There was going to be a motorcade through the city. At the end of the motorcade, the president was going to be in a public venue. In Chicago, it was going to be Soldiers Field. And in Dallas, it was going to be the Trade Mart. And there were all kinds of security weaknesses to those plans. And so with advance notice that there was an assassination plot afoot, at the very minimum, at the very least, the president's security, White House security details should have been on high alert. But as we are going to learn, not only were they not in high alert, they didn't do anything. Here you see the president's limo as it's making its way through Dealey Plaza. Actually, it's somewhere in the motorcade route. I don't know if it's Dealey Plaza or not, but you see the driver. The driver is a Secret Service agent named William Greer. Now, he was not the regular driver. He was a substitute. The regular driver had died in October. And that is another suspicious occurrence because the family is convinced that he did not die of natural causes like the Secret Service told them. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later as well. So the substitute driver, William Greer, operates, any Secret Service driver of a presidential limo operates under the with the training that if there is any kind of a aberrant occasion event along the motorcade, he is obligated to drive at maximum speed, taking evasive actions if necessary if shots are fired. This is straight out of the Secret Service manual. They're trained to do this. Any sign of trouble, of course, the limo is a high-powered limo. The body itself is bulletproof, but the engine is souped up. So there wasn't a car out there that could have kept up with that limo if the limo driver had done what he was supposed to do, which was to hit the gas after the first shot. Now, we'll talk more about this when we get into the ballistics and stuff, but the first shot happened and the president comes out from, you see it on the Zapruder film, he emerges from behind the Stemmons freeway sign holding his neck. The first shot hitting flush in the front, right in the neck. It was not a fatal shot. And so he comes out from behind that sign, he's been hit in the neck, and you see Jackie kind of turn. Everybody heard the shot. And you see Jackie kind of turn and she's reacting to her husband. The president's holding his Adam's apple, basically the front of his neck. And you see William Greer, the driver, turn his head and look, he reacts to the shot as well. So you know he heard it. And then you see the brake lights come on. Instead of hitting the gas, driving at maximum speed, taking evasive actions, William Greer hit the brakes. And the limo started to slow down. Of course, the whole motorcade's behind the limo. So whatever the limo does, the motorcade has to react to the limo. So the entire motorcade is slowing down. And it slowed down to such basically to a crawl. Some people said it came to a complete stop. That the Secret Service agent in the follow-up car, Clint Hill, was able to get off of the running board that he was on in the follow-up car on foot, chased down the limo. And here you see him, very famous picture, jumping up on the back of the limo. Jackie is trying to help him up with one hand. With the other hand, she's picking up pieces of the president's skull. Now, this is after the fatal shot. So this means now there's 5.6 seconds from the first shot to the fatal shot. This means that the president's limo, driven by William Greer, slowed down, came to a stop for 5.6 seconds, waiting for the fatal shot. You see William Greer, he continues to keep turning around looking. Meanwhile, there are other shots being fired, but he never hits the gas. And it isn't until the fatal shot, when everybody sees, the whole free world sees the president's head literally explode, that he finally begins to react and take off and hit but not yet. You see here, Jackie he's already been hit. The fatal shot has already happened. He has not hit the gas yet. Jackie would not be climbing up on the back of the car. Clint Hill would not be catching the car if he'd hit the gas yet. He is still stopped. And so 5.6 seconds really doesn't tell the whole story. That tells the story from the first shot to the last shot. But you can see the fact that the last shot has already occurred in this picture, the frame of the Zapruder film, and she's helping Clint Hill get up onto the back of the limo, that he is still stopped. So 7, 8, however many seconds it was, instead of following Secret Service protocol, William Greer completely stopped. And this is buttressed by not just video, but all these witnesses. 60 plus witnesses told the Warren Commission that the limo slowed almost to a stop after the shooting. That's what's in the Warren Commission. Ralph Yarborough, the Texas senator, in a car further back, a third car with LBJ, said, quote, when the noise of the shot was heard, the motorcade slowed to what seemed to me a complete stop. The cars all stopped. This is the picture I was talking about, where the president is holding his neck. As you can see, he's already been hit in the front. Jackie's turning to him. In fact, the governor, John Connally, is turning around. He heard the shot too, and he's turning around, but he has not been hit yet. He is turning around, reacting to the other shot, the first shot. And so Gene Hill, an eyewitness, says, quote, the motorcade came almost to a halt at the time the shots rang out. And I would say Kennedy's limo almost stopped. Jackie Kennedy, even in testimony later, said if the agent had hit the gas before the third shot, Jack might still be alive. Bo Byers of the Houston Chronicle said the president limo almost came to a stop, a dead stop. Earl Brown, a Dallas police officer, said the first I noticed the limo was when it stopped after it made the turn and when the shots were fired. It stopped. John Rady, a Secret Service agent, follow-up car, said, quote, I heard what sounded like firecrackers going off from my post on the right front running board. The president's car slowed. You notice he said firecrackers, plural, which means this isn't one shot. This is multiple shots. Robert Baskin, the Dallas Morning News reporter, said the motorcade ground to a halt. Mary Woodward, Dallas Morning News reporter, quote, instead of speeding up the car came to a halt. Alan Smith, an eyewitness, quote, the limo was 10 feet from me when a bullet hit the president in the forehead. The car went about 5 feet and stopped. Akis Campbell, another eyewitness, quote, after I heard the shots, the car bearing President Kennedy began to slow down, a near stop. Peggy Joyce Hawkins, eyewitness on the front steps of the Texas School Book Depository, which is behind the president's car, said the president's car was less than 50 feet from me when he was shot. It slowed down, almost coming to a full stop. Hugh Betzner, another eyewitness, quote, I looked down the street, I could see the president's car and another one, and the cars were stopped. Bill Newman, if you remember the Zapruder film, and I'll show you these pictures later, but he was there with his wife and child, and they were on the grassy knoll, and they hit the dirt. They were right in front of the president's car when the fatal shot happened, and he knew the shots were coming from behind him, and he was about as close to the president as you could be. He and his wife and his child. And he said, quote, after the final shot, the car momentarily stopped, and the driver seemed to have a radio or a phone up to his ear, and he seemed to be waiting on some word. I've maintained that they stopped. I still say they did. Now, that is William Greer and the driver. What about Roy Kellerman, who is pictured here with the red circle around his face? This is as they are just leaving Love Field, and he is riding in the passenger seat. So you have two Secret Service agents operating this vehicle. And we've already seen that William Greer was at best negligent, completely failed in his responsibility, following Secret Service protocols. Well, what about Kellerman? The protocol for an agent in the passenger seat is to jump up over the seats and cover the president's body with his own. In other words, as soon as that first shot occurs, he springs into action, and his job is to physically, with his own body, shield the president. And from the first shot, we've already learned it was 5.6 seconds from first to last shot. And then the limo was still stopped for several more seconds, giving him plenty of time to move. And yet, in that entire situation, Kellerman never moved. Now, contrast that with what happened in LBJ's car several cars back. Rufus Youngblood jumped on top of LBJ, threw him down on the seat, and put his body on top of him to protect him. So there's one instance where a Secret Service agent protected the vice president, but the two Secret Service agents responsible to protect the president, neither one did a thing. They're the one moved. The car stopped and Kellerman never moved to protect the president. How about the follow-up car? As you see here, this is the car. It's got 4 Secret Service agents riding on the side. These are on the running boards. And then it's loaded up with, I think there were 5 men inside the vehicle as well. So 9 men on the car total. Actually 8 or 4 in the car. So there are 8 Secret Service agents on board. And all of these guys are armed with automatic weapons. Their only job, they're as close to the president as they can be, and their only job is to protect him in the case of any kind of abnormal event. And only one of those 8 reacted, and he was the guy. Well, he wasn't even assigned to JFK. He was assigned to Jackie. That's Clint Hill. We showed him a couple slides back, running, catching the limo, jumping on the back, trying to protect Jackie. He's the only agent that took any action. The protocol for these 8 agents in the follow-up car, if they hear shots, and they all said that they did, the driver of the follow-up car is supposed to place his vehicle in the line of fire, which it was all coming. If you watch their faces and their heads, which way they turned, and where they're pointing, and the spectators are turning, it's all coming from the grassy knoll from the right side of the limo. So if the follow-up car driver had been following protocol, he would have placed his car, he would have driven up on the sidewalk if need be, and placed his car between where the shots were coming from and the president's car. And in addition, they would have all pulled their automatic weapons. And if they had seen a barrel of a gun or smoke from a shot or any indication of enemy fire coming from anywhere, they would have fired in that direction or jumped off the car and ran in that direction to stop the shooting while the car was providing interference protection for the president. None of that happened. The only agent that reacted at all was Clint Hill in the follow-up car. What did Lyndon Johnson say about all this when they took his testimony? Quote, "I was startled by the sharp report or explosion, but I had no time to speculate as to its origin because Agent Youngblood, Rufus Youngblood, the guy I told you about a minute ago, turned in a flash immediately after the first explosion, hitting me on the shoulder and shouted to all of us in the back seat to get down. I was almost pushed down by Agent Youngblood. Almost in the same moment which he hit or pushed me, he vaulted over the back seat and he sat on me. In other words, Rufus Youngblood followed procedure, did what he was supposed to do." This testimony was backed up by his wife, Lady Bird, who said Ruth Youngblood, I believe it was, vaulted over the front seat on top of Lyndon, threw him to the floor, and said, "Get down." So here what we see is, the question has always been this: did the Secret Service just have a bad day? After 62 years of providing near perfect protection for the president, Dallas happens, and all I've done is scratch the surface, I promise you, of what the Secret Service didn't do right. And these are so obvious that you can see just by standing in a crowd, spectating the event, just watching. You can see that William Greer hits the brakes. You can see he did not hit the gas. You can see that the Secret Service agent in the passenger seat did not vault over the seat to protect the president. He had plenty of time to do it. That if he had done it, the president would have been under him when that fatal shot was fired. Maybe he would have died, but the president's life would have been spared. Okay, so you see clearly 2 breakdowns of very, very important Secret Service protocols right off the bat from the first 2 people. And the 2 most, you could make an argument, the 2 most important people in the entire motorcade didn't do their jobs right. And then in the follow-up car, you have 8 more agents, 7 of which don't do their job right. And of course, the most important in that car is the driver as well, and he didn't follow procedure either. Clint Hill is the only guy, and he wasn't protecting the president, he was protecting Jackie. He was the only one who reacted. So I wanted to just lay this out early in this series of videos, because eventually we're going to circle back to the conspirators, and the Secret Service is one of those. And I want to plant that seed early that we learned in the last video that the elite guard is the only thing that stands between life and death for the king or the president. And the elite guard will protect the president and keep him alive as long as it agrees. This is according to Fletcher Prouty. As long as it agrees with that president, if there is ever such occasion that that elite guard does not agree, a human institution, is just as corruptible as any other human institution. And it doesn't take all of them. It only takes a few rogue elements at the top that are corruptible, and they give orders, and everybody below them follows those orders. Okay, well, that's episode 5. Hope you enjoyed that. We'll be back later this week with episodes 6, 7, and 8. And until then, everybody have a great week. Thank you.